Hi, and welcome back to Quest Markers. On this show, we talk about video games and the people behind them. I'm Rena. I make music and sounds for games. And today, I am so excited to have Rachel back with us. Rachel has worked on both the dev and the publishing side, helping games both get made and get funded. And today, we'll be talking about games publishing and what it looks like to secure funding for independent game studios. All of today's questions are community sourced. So thank you all so much for sending your questions in. So excited to dive in. And as always, this episode will be timestamped with the topics we cover. Feel free to jump around if you're watching the recording. And I'm so excited for today's conversation. But before we dive in, I actually don't know the answer to this, Rachel. You know how we start. How are you staying hydrated?
Oh my gosh, so boring today. Water, but water in a very fancy glass, which
I'm surprised.
I went to a lecture about water recently, and he was speaking about how we should be drinking water out of better cups. So there we go.
I agree. I do agree with that. I think a cup makes everything better.
Absolutely.
Cool cup makes everything better.
Mm-hmm.
I'm surprised. You usually have like a really cool drink that I've never heard of before.
Usually have nothing in my fridge but fun little drinks, but
it's the best way to live, TBH. Like, you need a little treat. You what?
Slammed my last poppy soda. What have you got
It's
there?
all gone.
Pause.
I have a coffee. It's just a black coffee. But yeah, like I really like this mug. Like it's nothing really special, but I like this mug and it makes it more fun. And then I do have water, which I will probably ignore for the duration of the episode. I'll try to have some water. It's in a blender bottle. It's not. There's no protein in it. It's just electrolytes. Gotta stay extra hydrated. Yeah, extra hydrated. Gotta get that in. But tell us a little bit about yourself before we get started.
Yeah. So let's see. I've worked in indie games about 5 or so years now, and I've worked at with 5 different publishers in one capacity or another. Currently working at Top Hat as biz dev and producer and game scout. And I've gotten a hold of different variety of those roles at various different publishers, but just I've spent a lot of time on the scouting and portfolio side of things. And that's just given me a view on, what kind of projects get funded, what's going on in the space, like how do people think about projects that are getting pitched for funding, and love supporting indies. So I try to judge different competitions like DICE and IGF as much as possible and just chat to all the indies I can.
Always a plethora of knowledge. Sorry, I saw that my mic was doing something, so I'll try to mute when I'm not talking. I think, yeah. But okay, you've already answered this question on a previous episode, but do you want to give us a very quick rundown of what your path has been getting into game development and game publishing?
Yeah, it was really interesting because when I first started my journey in college, right, I knew I loved working with creative things. Loved literature. So initially started working like when I was in college, studying literature in the literary industry, working on lit mags, doing theater stuff. And I knew I loved being part of creative teams and helping creative visions come forward. But those industries didn't seem as viable. And it actually wasn't until I saw a theater researcher making a Shakespeare game that I had a moment where I was like, oh, wait, you can make games? Because I grew up playing them, but I saw them as something that was just on the Games Cube or just on the PlayStation. And I didn't really realize that, no, there's human beings that put blood, sweat, and tears into making these. And so I started double majoring in game design, took a ton of classes, originally wanted to go the design route, but it was kind of as I was gearing up to graduate and kind of seeing what was available in the design space and what it would take to start a studio, that I thought to myself, let me get into publishing, figure out how it works, and then I can start a studio from a more knowledgeable place, kind of understanding the meat grinder before I put myself through it. And I got my first publishing internship at a publisher day after I started the day after I graduated in production, and it's kind of just been more and more since. I got to be a part of the green light process at that publisher. It was a global publisher. Many folks will probably have heard of them, Modus. They have they're known for many things, and went from Modus to working at a nonprofit investment fund for games called Astra, which was pretty unprecedented. I still haven't heard of anything like it. And I got to be a part of the founding team, pivoting it from a nonprofit investment fund into a publisher. We had fellowships, we were scouting projects. I got to grow from being their first production hire into being the business development and scouting manager. So I kind of built our pipeline, built our global relationships, got to travel all around the world talking to people about thinky games. That was super cool. And then since then, I've worked at various other places. And the thing that's kept me going is just like I'm utterly fascinated by, okay, how do games get funded? What goes into that? What drives one publisher to select a project versus another? What does the publishing landscape look like overall? Where is the funding beyond publishing? Because it is there. And then also like, what does it take as an indie to like make something that's going to get a foothold in the industry? Because there's so many things coming out on Steam and in one genre category versus another. Like there's different projects like fighting for visibility. And I'm just really curious right now around like, you spend all this time developing a project, right? You have like the concept phase, then you have the prototyping phase, and then you have the phase where you're doing development up until you launch and then beyond. I actually think it's like that very, very first moment where you're first thinking about the game that really it puts it on its course. And so I really want to understand better and better like positioning and how to talk to devs about it and how we can all get curious about like not just understanding how to pitch, but understanding like what is the right project to make beyond just like what is fascinating to you, but like what does it mean for a project to like get a foothold?
I think what you're doing is super cool. And thank you so much for being on today to help share your knowledge.
Yes.
Um, so all of our questions are community sourced today. So I'm going to open up my little document over here. I've compiled them all. I won't be reading out people's usernames in case they don't want that. But yeah, thank you everybody for submissions. So let's dive right in. First question is, what exactly should I talk about when presenting a pitch deck? Even after watching a lot of GDC speeches, I still feel quite insecure. We've got big questions
Hmm.
today.
Yeah. One thing I would say is okay, your pitch deck is kind of just the wrapper for what you're trying to present me, right? What you're really trying to present me is here's my game, here's where it's at, here's my plan for my game, and then like here's me. Um, and the thing is, publishers look at decks so fast. I don't know. I think people are pretty honest about this, but I think it's also an easy thing to miss. But like when you send a deck through a link and somebody has to go to the form and open the form and look at it, there's it's like a 5 second look, really quick. Like, okay, is this aligned with what we're looking for? Because it's not just about you; it's about what they're looking for. Is this aligned with what we're looking for? Does it look of quality? And then, am I curious enough to keep looking? And so, I would say, like, if you're thinking about just the deck itself, make sure you confront, like, make it easy to look at quickly because people are tired. They're getting hundreds of pitches, so many pitches. And so you want it to be easy to look at your thing and just like, okay, I get that strong first impression. I can tell what this is. It answers my basic questions. And like it's left me curious to learn more. So I want to bookmark it and come back to it later. And yeah, can go more into that one, but it's probably enough talking for now.
Is there a point where one might be presenting multiple pitch decks? So might there be a
Yeah.
situation where, excuse me, you present a pitch deck to kind of land the initial meeting, and then maybe before a contract is signed, like do you generally see that pitch deck changing at
Oh,
any point in
interesting.
time?
Yeah, I heard that question in a few different ways because it's also a thing where sometimes we'll pitch you multiple games at once, which I think makes sense if you're a studio with like distinct teams and lanes. Like if you truly are saying, we're looking to get both of these funded, here's two options for you. And you want to present them distinctly, each is their own thing. But I would definitely avoid a like, hey, here's 4 game concepts I have. Like, what do you think? Just because unless there's a clear reason why you're trying to get 4 things funded at the same time, it feels like a spaghetti approach. Even when the games are of quality, it can sometimes feel like, oh wait, why do you have 4 games for me? I'm scared. What's going on? But then I would say, yes, there are sometimes phases to pitch decks. I've worked at publishers where we want a lot of documentation. When I was working at like that more like thinky games publisher, right? We had like a nonprofit backing for what we were doing, and we had a really strong thesis for what thinky meant. So we would actually go pretty deep with teams we were getting close to signing, where we'd say, okay, we got your initial pitch deck. Now we really need to understand the mechanics a lot better. And so sometimes there would be like a requested follow up. I would never do more unless requested. If your game is like story driven and you specifically have a deep story deck so you can share that out, I think that's a great thing to have. Just if the material justifies itself and saves you from recreating something over and over, and it's a useful thing for your team, definitely have that. So, like, but I wouldn't make something just to make something, because I've also worked at many publishers where we don't do process for the sake of process. We're here because we're experts. We're here because we like working with devs. We don't want to ask you for things that you don't already have. But if you are making like a Souls like game and you have your initial pitch deck that's just like, here's my super sick game, here's my super sick team, here's the basic core loop, here's when we're trying to launch and what money we need. And then you have a whole separate deck that's like, here's all the areas and like the bestiary. Then, like, yeah, totally. I could see having that as a follow up that, you know, maybe it's a useful deck for your team to have. And then it's a really easy thing to share out.
My follow up question was going to be what should be in a pitch deck, but you just answered it. So.
I would make it as simple as possible, guys. And it could just be because I've been on the pitch funnel at so many publishers. But I like, even if so sometimes I love devs. I have so many developer friends, and sometimes I'm begging them before they're even ready to pitch to like, please show me something. And so oftentimes the thing I'm begging them for is, I just need to, what is the art in the game gonna be? Or like, what does it look like? Do you have any image you could show me? What is like the quick tagline about your game? And this should be like simple and hit hard. And so some people like to be like, it's this game and this game. Or some people like to just position it in a way, but like some sort of snappy tagline. I want to know how long your game is roughly. So like how many hours or like how many areas? Like I need to know how much money you need to be able to like talk about it internally, and then roughly when you're going to launch. Some people know, hey, it's 2026 and we're pitching to try to get signed by the end of 2026, and we want to launch in December, but we're a little flexible. And then some people are like, yeah, maybe sometime in 27 or 28. Depends. Like both answers are fine. We just need to know when you roughly want to come out. And some people don't have an answer. Sometimes the answer is, we've been working on this game. We're not in a rush to find a publisher. We think we have about a year or two left. Like, I would say, like, don't look at pitch decks too dogmatically. The core things we always need to know are, what is your game? Is there a build? Do you need money? How much? When is it going to come out? And then the rest, like, you know, kind of depends on what you're making and where it fits in. I would pretty much always have a core loop. And it doesn't need to be like a dogmatic core loop. I just need to be able to understand what happens when I play your game, and like, what are there different modes? Are there different things like that? And then depending on what you're making, you can break it down to greater or levels of detail or not. But I would definitely just keep reinforcing, like, your pitch deck is almost like, you want me to look at your pitch deck, understand your game really quickly and easily, and then feel like, oh man, I want to play the build. I want to take time out of my day and my team's day and say, hey, like, let's play this. Or even if not, like, oh, hey, I have questions about this. Let me email the developer and like ask those questions.
That makes sense. One last follow up from me before we
Yeah.
move on. How important is it to have a production schedule if you are kind of actively seeking a publisher
Hmm.
for funding as opposed to something like marketing support? I actually don't know whether, you might approach a publisher just for marketing support or whether it's
Hmm.
always for funding, but I'm curious kind of how important is it to have, let's say, kind of a rough draft of a production schedule? Because I'm assuming, like, if you're going in and pitching and saying, hey, we need X amount of dollars, here's how we intend on spending it, I would be anticipating, if I was on the other side of that table, that I would be able to see some sort of production plan for how that budget is going to be allocated.
Yeah. And, still do production work, a lot of background as a producer. And so, like, very sympathetic to this question, right? Like, what, like, do I need a production schedule? What does it need to look like? Does that mean I need to bust out a Gantt chart? Like, what do I do? I would say,
Hey, I
like,
love Gantt charts.
I would say to the tired indie developer wondering this, don't like stress too much again about like format and getting it right, because you want to zoom out and ask yourself, like, why do they need to know this? And there's a few different reasons publishers need to know your development schedule. A, they want to understand, like, okay, what have you done so far for the game and what's left? So, like, if you're pitching me again, like a Souls like game, there's different areas, there's different like biomes, creatures, weapons. Like, I kind of want to understand where are we at in the timeline and what's left to go. And people use terms like alpha and beta, all these different terms, and they are standardized to an extent, but that doesn't necessarily mean people use them to mean the same thing. So using plain language is something I would definitely recommend. And you could say like, oh, we're going to hit alpha here, we're going to hit beta here, but like, are you actually feature complete? Are you actually content complete? What does that mean for your game? So you could even just think to yourself like, okay, I need simple bullet points about how much we've done, how much is left to go, and what the game looks like when it's done. Because what a publisher is going to do is look at that production schedule. And if they want to sign you, say, okay, this will roughly become, we're going to build your milestones based off the milestones you have here. So you put yourself in a better position when you think of it like, what are the milestones left to complete the game? And you sketch it out that way, because then the publisher will just use the milestones you have unless they have suggestions, which they pretty much always will, unless you have great production skills and have just perfectly mapped it out. So that's one piece. We want to know where you are, what's left to go, and how it breaks down, how those features, how that content breaks down. And then the other angle from which we need to understand your production schedule a bit better is, and this is where it ties into like, okay, but what if I'm just looking for marketing support? What if I'm just going to talk to a marketing agency and see if like they'll work with me or they'll support my project? What we need to know from a marketing angle is, when is your build capturable? When is it possible to do a demo for something like Steam Next Fest or around key events? Um, and not just like capturable generally, but usually like there will be multiple trailers that happen during a game's time. So, there's going to be an earlier trailer where maybe not everything's in. And then you might want to say, okay, at this point, we're going to have like all the other biomes and things in. And so this will be another part that's great for like a bigger trailer that can showcase like all the areas of the game and things like that. So calling these things out, like, here's when we'd expect to do our like play testing is another great thing to think about. And you don't have to have all this in there, but definitely just have this in mind when thinking about making that production schedule, because it can feel like just homework to do sometimes, but there's a, I think reminding yourself of like what's the actual purpose of like putting these things down is helpful.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I feel like you've already dropped so much wisdom. That's awesome. Moving on to the next question. Next question is, what support, actually, this works out really nicely. What support do publishers offer besides financial support?
Yeah. So this can vary publisher by publisher. They're pretty much all going to say, like, we do the standard things, but the standard things aren't even standard, right? Like, even just marketing support. Marketing support isn't really even standardized across publishers. So I guess just to break it out, there's the financial support you'll receive unless you get signed for $0, which sometimes people do pitch for $0. So there's the funding. There's generally production support. So you will likely have a producer assigned to your project wherever you are, or someone functioning as the publisher side producer. And even though this person is a publisher side producer, sometimes they can become very embedded with your team and essentially be like running your sprints, looking at your bug boards, playing your game a ton and helping you figure out how to run play tests. And so that just like scales. And honestly, most publishers, unless they're pushy, like it will also depend on what you want. So if you really like having support, most publishers have a producer who's going to love to work with you and be as supportive as possible. And if you're like, I'm a solo indie dev, I've been doing this for years, stay out of my business, and your game's on track, that usually is just fine as well. And then that production that production support can be less hands-on about your development and just more hands-on about like, hey, we got to localize this thing, we got to submit to these platforms, we got to reach out to all these streamers, we need to have your build ready in time for that. So like the production support isn't just about development, it's also about the really complex machine that is putting your game out on time in multiple places, which is so much more complex than I can even say. There's all these timings that you have to get right as a publisher. So funding, production support, marketing support. And yeah, marketing support, what are the core things you do to market a game? Usually make trailers, post on social media, be a part of events. And those are like broad brushstrokes. But then, like, a publisher, when you sign with a publisher, they should be making a campaign for your game, a go to market from start to finish, and saying, this is who we think the audience is. This is how we think we can access that audience. These are the beats we're going to use to try to access that audience. And usually that's going to look like we're going to do a trailer at this time, a demo at this time, a next fest at this time. We're going to try to get in these showcases and these events. We're going to try to cultivate relationships with these streamers or be on these platforms, because not all games have the same socials that make the most sense for them. Some of them have different socials, like Reddit versus TikTok. Like maybe it's good to post on both, but maybe if you're making an automation game, you should probably be on Reddit more than anything else. So marketing can vary a lot. Some publishers will actually post for you on socials, and some won't. And that's actually going to vary a ton. And so if you're pitching around and you want to know exactly what kind of marketing support you'll receive, like definitely know what's important to you in your game, because it could just be a situation where, hey, maybe your publisher won't post on socials, but your dev funding is such that you can hire a social media person or like have someone on your team be dedicated to that. So I would definitely dig into the nitty gritty of how a publisher intends to market your game, because it is not the same at all of them. And I think sometimes people can, I mean, I've worked at 5 different publishers. I've gotten confused about like, oh wait, do we do this thing here? Do we do that thing here? So don't be afraid to ask. So funding, production, marketing support, biz dev. Biz dev feels like a hazy area. Like, what do you mean you're going to do business development for my game? You're just going to go get sacks of money? Hopefully, usually biz dev means talking to platforms and partners, and it can kind of intersect with marketing a bit, right? So, like, talking to first parties like PlayStation, Nintendo, and Xbox about your game, which those are things you can do before you pitch. And it's actually better for you if you have started those conversations yourself. But a publisher will usually have strong relationships because they have a portfolio of games that they're always pitching. They're always chasing Nintendo and saying, talk to me about our games. We love you. Can we please be in your showcase? And so a publisher can kind of take the burden of like chasing platforms off you. and they'll have more context on the type of deals that are available and how to try to receive them. And beyond first party platforms, there's also other platforms like Crunchyroll or Epic. They'll be able to talk to people like that. They'll understand a bit more what those pipelines look like. And then there's all sorts of other deals in the gaming space. Usually these become more interesting after your game has launched. So that's another benefit of being with a publisher, is that if you're with a publisher post-launch, a good one is thinking about how can I keep getting opportunities for this game, because I don't want it to just ship and do well. I want it to continue to do well. So they'll be looking for like bundle opportunities, key opportunities, cloud service opportunities, all sorts of things. So biz dev is another big area. And yeah, I mean, that's a lot. There's even more areas we could talk about, like development support, porting support. Some publishers have in-house porting, others will set you up with a porting studio. But I'd say that kind of falls under production. Well, production a bit, but yeah.
So to summarize, it is more than financing, which is really cool.
It is
and
more
it
than
depends
financing.
on the publisher. So yeah.
Don't be afraid to ask questions, because even if they say, yeah, we do all the usual stuff, they probably do it slightly different than the other person who says they do all the usual stuff. And at the end of the day, it's a lot of stuff to do. So it's still helpful regardless of what configuration of things they offer. It's just the last thing you want is to be surprised that, oh, I thought you would provide this one specific thing I care about, but you don't. Okay, let me then. You just want to know how to compare better, because maybe you're a team and you want really like hands-off support. You just want someone who's going to take care of porting your game, getting it out, and you just want to make it and be left alone. There's a publisher for you. Or if you're a team where you really would love an embedded producer who's like not just coordinating the publishing stuff, but like up in your business and being your best friend and helping you like figure out play testing and balancing and all sorts of things. There are lots of publishers that have that as well. So just knowing what you're looking for is key.
I was gonna say, yeah, like knowing exactly what kind of support is needed is important.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
It's hard
Makes
because they
sense.
don't necessarily advertise these things, but submit a question to Quest Markers, or I don't know. Get in my DMs and I will tell you the best that I know. Let's say
Perfect.
that.
No, this is awesome. This is already like so much wisdom and knowledge. Switching gears a little bit. So next question is, in what state does the game have to be for it to be suitable to be presented to a publisher? Should it have a demo, a prototype? How should a studio go about planning for this?
Yeah. Okay. This varies, guys. I will say, in 2026, I get to speak to so many really cool indie devs, from people just starting in their careers to people who have launched like really successful games. And I'm like geeking out the whole time we're talking. Pretty much everyone has to have a playable build at this point. It's really difficult. Like, I've worked with larger publishers, I've worked with smaller publishers. It is so difficult for us to say, yeah, we're going to commit to this, and we have not played a build. So having a build is super important. However, I would say, like, rather than making the biggest build you can with all the stuff you can, it's actually just really important to show like what's the core of the thing, right? And like just getting that right. And so even if it's less than 10 minutes, if you can show us something, in an ideal world, publishers have endless time to play builds and will play countless put countless time into whatever you send them, but that's not really reality. The reality is usually people don't even play for that long. They're looking long enough to understand what's there, how do you execute on it, and again, like, am I curious to know more? So usually it's a pretty quick playthrough. Sometimes if people get hooked, they'll keep playing, especially like broader members of the team. But I would say to yourself, like, what's the least I can show? And like, how does that make it, how am I creating an impact, or what am I communicating? And this is so difficult because there's some types of games where like, okay, yeah, I'm making like a little roguelike thing. I'm just going to get this core systems in. We're going to focus on like a few rounds of that feeling good. But then it's really unfair when you're talking about deeply systemic games where it's like, okay, but for us to show you even this much, we have to make all these interconnected systems. And how do you do that without burning a ton of resources and time and know you're getting it right? I don't have a good answer there. It really sucks. But I think just thinking about, it's not just about showing the content, it's about, did I have an interaction that felt meaningful? And so maybe you don't have to get in all these different systems. Maybe you just have to get in whatever can create one meaningful interaction that makes me go like, oh, okay, I get it. And that'll look different depending on the type of game it is. But I would say focus on like something meaningful, because it's one thing to play a really polished FPS build and oh my gosh, there's all these levels and there's all these enemies and stuff. But if it kind of just feels like I'm going through levels and shooting enemies, that might not be enough for me to go to my team and say, hey, we should really investigate this more. But if it's an FPS game and it only has one or two levels, only a few enemies, but something really interesting happens, and I realize like, oh, this mechanic totally subverted my expectations in like 5 or 10 minutes, and I had a little like brain tingle. That's really all we need to see. And I will say, if you're a team that's made previous projects before, you can get away with sending a gray box more easily because you can say, hey, we haven't put art, audio, or anything into this. You can look at our last game and see how we do that. It's going to be as good as that. And like 95% of the time, we're just going to be like, okay, absolutely. We know your last game. That's sick. We can picture what the art and audio experience will be like. And so I definitely like, if you're a team that can refer to previous work, like feel super comfy sending a gray box that just focuses on mechanics. But if you are a newer team, then something we are looking for is like, okay, what is the quality of what's present? And usually we have to say to ourselves, like, okay, we can only expect the animations to be as good as like the best animation we can see. We can only expect the art or the audio to be as good as like the best thing that we can see. And so again, I'd say less is more, like focus on showing your best instead of saying like, okay, we want to get a demo in front of publishers. Let's try to get as much content in as possible. Like, pare back when you can.
I love that because my follow up question was going to be how polished does a vertical slice need to be? But it sounds like maybe the best approach is have a vertical slice that's really tight, that's short, that's not like super, super long. But maybe if you are, let's say, a team that hasn't worked together before, invest some time into
Yeah.
polishing that. So essentially, because you have to
Yeah.
show the craft, right? Like you,
You have to prove you can do it.
mm,
If you haven't done it before, you have to prove you can do it, which doesn't have to be super scary, right? Because it's like it's just the best that you guys can execute on and do. And the last thing you want to do is burn a ton of time into making that first thing, because what can happen is like, I mean, we're kind of baking without a recipe when we're doing game dev. We're like, I have these inspirations. I think this would taste really good. And you can look at that like vertical slice as like when the thing comes out of the oven for the first time. So if you spend way too much time researching the recipe, putting the ingredients together, like trying all these different things, but it takes you like over a year or 6 months to get something out of the oven, it could taste bad or the ratios could be off, and you might need to either redo the recipe or like change or rebalance some things. So like you just want to get something out of the oven as soon as possible, because you don't really know what it's going to be until you have gotten the first person to play test it. And definitely definitely have people play test your game before you send it out, because sometimes I, even really cool games, I'll get sent them and I'll be like, oh, do you guys play test much? And they'll be like, oh yeah, I had like one friend play test it. um definitely find a stranger or two to play
That is good advice. That is gold.
it.
I love that. Um, kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of what a publisher can offer. The next
Yeah.
question is, where can I find a publisher that's going to be the best fit for my studio? I prefer meeting with people in person, but sometimes that just isn't possible.
Oh, I'd say that's very difficult in the modern age, actually. I mean, going to conferences is so expensive. I do think it's helpful. I mean, it depends on where you're based, right? Because if you're in Europe, they're so spoiled over there. They can just hop on a train and then all the publishers are out at all the different events. So it's way easier there. Usually each country has like their one big conference that everybody goes to. I think Australia has like, South by Southwest. They have Melbourne International Games Week. In the US, like GDC and PAX are kind of our big ones. I'd say the turnout between the two is actually kind of interchangeable on the publisher side. Sometimes you won't have like certain scouts at PAX that you would see at GDC, but can vary. And then there's all sorts of other countries. I won't list all the conferences. But one thing I will say is like there are lists online. Like there's Alan Dang's publisher list. I think it's a good list overall. It at least lets you know which websites to Google. There's also somebody made something called Publisher Pathfinder. It's kind of like a choose your own adventure, finding a publisher thing. But one thing I would just say is like, what are you making? Get obsessed with that kind of game, right? Just like be really curious. Like, okay, these are the games that are my inspirations. These are the really good, not good. I don't want to put a value judgment on it. These are the games that have gotten a lot of visibility in sales and lots of great reviews in that genre. And then here are some games that are like lower to mid, where like they might be well regarded by players, have good reviews, but maybe don't have as much sales. Look at the people who are publishing those types of games because that's going to give you your answer, right? Like you want your publisher to not just be good at publishing games, but like be good at publishing your game because they're not all the same. And I, if I was pitching, that would probably be my preferred method. Like I think these lists and things are helpful. They do have some context on them that can be useful, but lists can be out of date. Preferences can be out of date because the thing is, publishers actually change pretty regularly. I'd say, like every publisher has the amount of titles they're trying to sign for a given year. They're constantly in flux. Usually there's somebody at the top getting excited about a new genre over a weekend, or like a new, very, very specific niche within their niche. And so I would do research. I would create a list of publishers. And then here's the important thing, like reach out and make friends. Like yes, send your pitch in through the form. But even if you're not ready to pitch yet, this publisher that you want to work with, they probably either have a scout, a biz dev, or just any producer you can find. If you DM a producer at a publisher, they will 99% of the time be so excited to talk to you. And all you have to do is say, hey, I'm making a game. I think you guys are really cool. I'm actually not ready to pitch yet, but I really just want to learn more about your publisher and like, what do you guys care about? What do you do? And like, I don't know if you're the right person to talk to, but like, do you want to chat? Like try to just make friends. And if nobody replies to your DM, wait a respectable amount of time, a week too, and like DM somebody else. But you don't even necessarily have to wait until you're full on ready to pitch. Like I wouldn't just spam people needlessly, but if you have like if you make your list of people you want to talk to and you have a top 5, I would try to just kind of learn more about them because you might find, oh, I'm pitching something for, and if you are ready to pitch, just going through the form is the preferred way because publishers have these forms because they get so many DMs. Um, and this will usually put it in like a spreadsheet or something for them that makes it a lot easier for them to look through. But if you're if you have a question and like you think you're not quite at the stage where they'd say yes, you can still put it into the form and be like, hey, I'm sharing my details with you now, but I really just want to talk. Like, I really just want to understand better. Like, what are you guys looking for? If you put that on the form, the person looking at it should see it. And if they have the time and they're feeling nice, they'll hopefully be like, oh, yeah, thanks for reaching out. This isn't quite at the level we need right now, but we do like this genre, or we don't like this genre. This isn't our genre. And maybe they'll be extra helpful and like tell you some nice things. But I do think just trying to DM slide online is something I would recommend over conferences broadly, just because conferences happen so infrequently. If you're in a fortunate enough position where you can afford to go, that's awesome. You'll also need to slide into people's DMs or via the pitch inbox to talk to them there. So if you know the game you want to make and you have your ideal list of publishers, like try to make friends.
That's really insightful because, as you said, conferences can be so inaccessible. Like, it's expensive to travel, it is expensive to get accommodation, like, it is expensive to
Yeah.
go to multiple conferences. It's expensive to go to one conference, let alone to multiple conferences in a year. So I like
Yeah.
the insight that you have of like, you're still going to have to reach out. So get comfortable reaching out
Exactly.
and
And
meeting cool people.
if you're trying to schedule something 2 weeks before a conference, you're too late unless I'm in love with you and I love your game, or I got your email at such and such time that I love you. I just think you're a cool person. I want to talk to you. But like 2 weeks is too late if you're trying to talk to somebody around a conference. And the best way to use conferences is for relationship building, right? So if you've already pitched or you've already talked to them and they have enough details to like actually sit and talk to you, because the last thing you want to do is be trying to like cram an actual presentation into like a 10 or 30-minute meeting. I know a lot of scouts that actually won't meet with anyone unless you've sent them your pitch deck and your build before, um, to like actually do like a meeting where we're talking about your pitch. Now, again, it can be different if you just manage to make a friend, right? And you say like, hey, I might not have these things ready, but like, I just really want to talk to you. Which like oftentimes scouts won't have time for that. But yeah, think about your game, think about the way to approach it, but get comfy with the DM slide, because maybe you'll send it through the form and get a response. Maybe you'll send it through the form and not get a response. Maybe you're not ready to submit through the form. Make friends.
Yeah, makes sense. I like it. Next question. What are some ideal terms for a game studio in a publishing contract? And the flip side of
Oh,
that is, what are red flags to avoid when reading through a publishing contract?
this is such a spicy question, guys.
It's our last community source question as well, and it's a pretty big one.
Let me actually zoom out and talk about what a publishing deal is. Okay. You have a game. Let's assume you want money for it. Let's assume you're not pitching me a $0 game. If you are pitching me a $0 game, your terms are great. They're the most generous we could offer you. We're so excited to work with you on your game that doesn't need funding, because it lowers the risk for a publisher quite a bit. But once there's a different amount of investment needed, it starts to change what your terms are. And different publishers have different bands they work in. I've worked with publishers where they look up to 1 million, they look up to 2 million. I've worked with publishers where they don't sign games above 250K, or they don't sign games above 500K. So it kind of depends on where you are. Like, are you at the bottom of our band? Or are you at the middle of our band? Are you at the top of our band? Or are you beyond the top of our band? And did we have to ask for money because we love your game so much? We have to work on it. Depending on where you are in that spectrum, it's going to affect the recoup terms a publisher gives you. And okay, what are the recoup terms? Your game will make money once it comes out. That money, if you sign with a publisher, will be split, right? Because a publisher is giving you a certain amount of money up front. Usually they say we will split the percentage of revenue like this until we've recouped that money. That means we've made that money back. Some publishers don't just say until we've made the money back. Sometimes they say until we've made the money back twice. So if I give you 200K, we now have to make 400K to get into a new tier where we give you a different percentage. So the recoup terms are a thing, like 70-30. Oftentimes you'll see like 70-30, 70 to the publisher, 30 to the dev. And then once we hit recoup, it flips. Okay, 70 to the dev, 30 to the publisher. And that recoup split, very variable. It can change a lot. Publishers don't want to tell you what their split is. And often the line will be, well, we need to know how much your game costs. We need to understand the risks around it until we can propose a split to you. So usually they'll have a standard split they use, but typically like you're going to have to pitch and they're going to have enough information to be able to let you know, okay, like here's what it would actually be for your game. And there's non-nefarious reasons for why it's different, right? Because there's a lot of things there's usually a pool of things that can go into a recoup split. This is also not the same with every publisher. Lots of things are different depending on where you go. But like common things you'd see in the pool are like, do they have a minimum or maximum marketing spend? Is your game going to have a bigger marketing budget than another game? Okay, that affects the split. Some publishers recoup QA time, other time that affects it. Porting. Is your game going to all the platforms? Are some of those platforms going to be really difficult, like Switch, for your game in particular? That estimated porting costs, that can go into the split. Like how we're thinking about, because the way that a publisher devises that split is they say, okay, we're going to put this money into this project. We love this team. We love what they're making. What is the business case that allows us to do that in such a way where we keep our lights on and keep our team running? So usually in a good faith negotiation, a publisher is trying to just understand, okay, on what timeline does it work for us to like be able to get to the point where we give you the greater half of the split. So different things that can go in the recoup pool. You want to think about the terms you're getting, but that's another way to understand the terms. Because I think sometimes people are just like, I just want to get the best numbers possible. So 70-30 or 80-20 or this and that. And it's like, it's going to depend based on what you're asking for and who. And it might not even be different from one publisher to another for nefarious reasons, because one might actually be offering you better services. Or just different services. And so like a question you can ask, even if they're not ready to talk to you about what a split would be, if you've made it past that first conversation or you're in that first conversation, you could even say like, okay, well, like what kind of services do you guys recoup? That's a good question to ask. And then I guess terms, there's lots of terms that go into a publishing contract, but one thing I would look at is how long is your agreement? Because that is also different. Some people say 5, some say 7, some say 10. How long are you working with this publisher for? And then you'll
When you say
see
five,
lots of
seven,
other
10,
things.
that's years. Yeah. Yeah.
Years. Yes. Yes. So that can change. I've not seen every publishing contract, so I don't know all the things that are out there, but I have seen those numbers. Other things to think about in terms, right of first look, right of first refusal, pretty standard, but something to keep in mind. Like, and I think Raw Fury has their contract online actually, and somebody did a deep dive on it. Like, I think a lawyer did a deep dive on it talking about it. And I think what's really useful about that is you can just hear the standard terms spoken about. So I would check that out. And then Outersoft just shared their contract. People are talking about that a bunch. That will be different than a standard publishing contract, though, is one thing I'll say. Because again, they're not explicitly providing services. So it's a different type of agreement than someone who's like going to try to carve out rights for merch and things like that. But yeah. I don't know.
That makes
More
sense.
questions on that?
I mean, I think that's already very, very valuable, and pointing folks to the Outer Sloth contract, the Raw Fury contract,
Yeah.
and to your point, like the conversations around it, I think is just good education for people to understand like what clauses are. Yeah, I think that's great. Um, I have a question now. So
Yes.
the end of our community questions, but given everything that we've spoken about, what advice do you have for developers who are looking to get their next game funded?
It's a tough one. I think it's a scout if there's or just someone who's worked in publishing, like in the green light process, like looking at the projects coming in. I would say like positioning matters so much. Just getting the right positioning. And this also changes like all the time, right? Games are in conversation with each other, new things are coming out, different things are happening. And so like you want to find the blend between like, well, this is what I love and this is the space I know. Um, and also like uh, are there people interested in this thing? And so you don't want to be like just chasing trends or whatever, but there are like not all genres perform the same. And you might kind of have an understanding of that, or you might not. It's been something I've gotten to learn about a ton, even just in the last 3 years. I love to look, I love looking up, oh, here's this game I like. How many copies did it sell? And you can't see that in a true sense unless you are the developer or the publisher. But there are sites where you can like they approximate these things based on public info. And it can sometimes be quite surprising, like what's happening in one genre versus another, because they have like different floors and ceilings. I work at a publisher right now where we've signed a bunch of different little Metroidvanias, but they're all best in class Metroidvanias where they look extremely distinct in one screenshot or another. I personally wouldn't want to be pitching a game like that and like having to reach that extremely high standard. But if you have a thesis for some really unique mechanic and visual style in that space, then I would go for it. And that's the thing I would say is like beyond just wanting to make an interesting game, I would ask yourself, like, okay, what's your thesis? Okay, I like roguelike deck builders. I want to make a bad example. I'm using a bad example deliberately, but I want to make a roguelike deck builder and pitch it. Um, it's not enough to make a good roguelike deck builder. Not even if your game's super polished. It's not enough because like why would people play it? So like what core complaint or desire are you fulfilling with what you're making? Like I think there's this game called Grave Seasons. I'm a huge fan of it. It's being published by Bloomhouse Games, and it's Stardew Valley meets murder mystery. So you have that loop in Stardew Valley where you start every day, you work on your farm, you make relationships with other characters, and you roam around, and it's like pretty idyllic. And there's a massive Stardew Valley audience who like they've played countless hours of this game. They have tons of mods. Like these people are hungry. They want more farm, but they probably want farm that's a little different, right? And so what Grave Seasons does is they introduce this element that's like, oh, and there's a killer who's murdering people, and it changes, and you have to play the game to figure out who it is. And it's like, oh, this thing I wanted, and I wanted more of it, and it's like kind of different in this like way that's sticky. Um, and I'd say like definitely across genres, like you see games do really well when they kind of have this sense of like I'm satisfying a core complaint or a core desire, and it can just be a core complaint or desire you have. And if you're someone who's played countless automation games, you probably have a good sense of what you're looking for or what you really want to see. Or if you're kind of exploring a new genre space with a team, check out Reddit. Like, I love going to different subreddits and seeing the questions people ask, especially when people are like, recommend me games like this. I think that can be really helpful when, even if you already know what you're making, looking at things like that and kind of understanding like what do the people want? What are they asking about year over year?
And that's going to be different for different people. It's going to be different across genres. It's going to be different based off of people's history and the games that they've played. I don't know if you're familiar with Antonio Freire's work, who
No.
okay, I need to send you some of his games. So he was on the show in January, and we spoke about and I'm probably going to paraphrase this poorly, but I'll link our January episode below if anyone wants to check that out. But we spoke about this idea that like for some games, the most compelling thing about them is going to be their world and the fact that players
Yeah.
will want to spend time in the world. And like I think a good example of that is the Dark Souls series. Like you have this like broken dark fantasy world where some people want to experience the world and want to spend countless hours in that world. Some people are going to be there for the combat. Some people are going to just get through the combat just to experience the world. And so there's different reasons why people play certain games. So I really like what you called out there. And I love how Antonio had put it back in January of like for some players, like the world just needs to be really, really, really compelling. And I love that. If you are going to play one of his games, I don't know if you were just Googling it, but it comes in
Mm.
waves.
Comes in
Like very,
waves.
very short game. Like you could probably finish it in an hour or two, but I was like bawling my eyes out by the end of the game, and it surprised me. So good, so good. Huge fan. Big recommend. Um, yeah, but I love kind of what you touched on. Like what is the player wanting? Like what is that group of players wanting?
Yeah, because I think like well, you spend all this time making game, and that's different. Like some people take a few months and get to a prototype. Some people take a year or two, and they're like in the process of pitching for years. But it's all to get to this point where you're showing it to someone and they're looking at it and going, okay, why this game? Why now? And that question can be answered by because people have always wanted something like this in this genre space and no one's ever done it. And this team's going to do it. And this is a thesis that could stand the test of time. This game would be valuable whether it came out this year or 5 years from now. It's kind of about whoever, like Blueprints, kind of just a masterwork of a game. Like, oh, I'm not, it's roguelike puzzle. What? Like, I think there's still a lot of excitement around like people bringing roguelike to places they haven't seen it before. Like, Against the Storm is one of my favorite games all time. It's done so well, guys. If you're going to try to figure out how well like any game is done, like go look at Against the Storm because this game's pretty crazy. Like, in Frostpunk, you usually, which is a city builder game, it's a harsh city builder game. In Frostpunk, you usually have to play different runs, and these runs will last like an hour or two as you're like building out your camp, and then you fail, and it takes so long. In a game like Against the Storm, the runs are only 20 or 30 minutes, and so you get to learn so much quicker, and it just totally changes the experience of playing in that genre space. So theses like that can be quite simple, but can be about how do I change the structure of how people play in a genre space. Those are really strong and can be relevant regardless of when they come out, just if no one's addressed that yet. And then there can also just be smaller theses around like, hey, Lovecraftian stuff is hot. No one's made this Lovecraftian thing. And we have really strong art values and we think we could do this great. So I would just, it's in the end, it's going to come down to your thesis. And the thesis can be really simple. I mean, like Bollock's Pit, what is that? It's like, what's that game where you break the lines? What is that called?
Oh, I'm not sure.
Oh, Brick Breaker. Bollock's Pit is
Oh,
basically
okay,
the
yeah, yeah.
OG Brick Breaker, but it's just super polished and has great audio and visuals. And it doesn't have to be like doesn't have to be super complex, but like the more simple your thesis is, oftentimes like that means it's got to be super juicy. And if your thesis is simple, your game probably has to be very polished and sticky on its own right. Whereas if you're, say, in a more systemic game space and you have a thesis that's a little bit more like about a specific thing happening in the genre space could maybe be a little easier to get a foothold in there if you just are like exploring something nobody's quite explored.
That makes sense. Also, sorry, I've been fiddling with my microphone interface this whole time because I'm looking at my audio levels and I'm like, what's going on?
I
Um,
didn't even notice.
I haven't told you this, but I recently bought Against the Storm for a friend based off of your recommendation like 2 years ago.
I never stopped talking
uh,
about this game.
which I love. But to wrap us up, because I do want to get you out of here on time, want to make sure we have some time for Q&A. I usually ask, as you know, you've been on the show before, if you could give your younger self a piece of advice, what would it be? But I want to flip that on its head because at the
Oh,
start, you mentioned at some point in time in the future, you potentially might start your own studio. You might
oh
be
my
in a
gosh.
position where you're pitching. What advice would you give your older self based off of everything that's very top of mind for you today? And
Oh, that's really
obviously, like,
interesting.
this is so nuanced because, like, the landscape is going to change at that point in time. But I'm curious what comes to mind.
Yeah. Okay, if I was going to give my younger self advice, get in people's DMs. Get in people's DMs. Just in general, like I think sliding into DMs and making friends, like for me in my career, like all the cool things I've done have come from that. It's not been, oh, some opportunity I knew existed. It kind of came from, hey, I'm really curious about this thing and I want to learn more about it. And I think this person knows more about it. And I'm just like, hey, do you want to talk to me? Can I learn more about that? And that has got guys, that's gotten me so far. It's got me so far. And I've gotten to learn so much. And people are pretty much always going to be happy to talk to you. If you just send them something nice, be respectful, leave them alone if they don't reply. But sometimes I have people DM me 4 times and I only reply on the fourth time because it's not that I didn't see your DM. I'm just busy. And it doesn't mean I didn't like you that I didn't reply. I was just busy. And if you just keep hitting the lotto and like being nice about it, you might actually get a reply far after you thought it was like, not possible to speak to this person. So I would definitely say to a younger Rachel, just don't be scared to talk to people because you will learn more faster. You will be exposed to new things and you will realize how wrong you are quicker, which can only be helpful. And you will probably make people who you'll probably get to meet people who will really appreciate that you want to learn more about the thing that they know something about. It feels good to talk to people about things. And what would I say to future Rachel? Yeah, so I wanted to make a studio after I graduated. And I mean, I think something we don't talk a lot about in game development is like the human cost of working in this industry. Like you got to bootstrap it if you want to start a studio. And I was in college, didn't have many commitments at the time, and looked at that prospect and went, "Ooh, I'd have to bootstrap so hard and like give up my weekends and my evenings to make something." And 5 years in, I only understand more the reality of what it takes to not just make a game, but to make a studio. It's one thing to make a game you find is interesting. That's like a whole endeavor. Like you can make an art game, an expressive game, and that in itself is just difficult. It's just difficult to make a good, impactful game. To make a good, impactful game that is also commercially positioned, I would say is like a whole nother beast, right? Because it's not just about have I made something interesting? Have I made something expressive? Have I made something that fits a commercial model that would, and some people just sit down and they make something and then someone wants to give them money for it because they just happen to get it right. And I wouldn't compare yourself to those people. Those people are crushing the game and we love them for it. But like, there's no shame in like coming up with a cool idea, thinking it's really cool, and then realizing somewhere along the way, like, oh, wait, this might not be commercially positioned. We might just need to pick a different idea if we really want to go this like publisher route. So the future, Rachel, what would I say? I would say like build in public. And like again, ask people questions. Like if I was gonna say, you know what, screw having a personal life. I want to make a studio this year. I'm going to get my friends together and we're going to make a game. And we're going to either get funding for it from a publisher or from an angel investor or from a VC, someone, because we're going to make something so cool and it's going to satisfy some thesis. And I believe that we can do it. If I wanted to do that this year, I would spend as little time possible coming up with the actual idea. I would put thought and energy into that, but I'd come up with the idea, figure out what's the quickest path to a prototype that you can interact with, get to that point, interact with it, and like I'd be talking to people every step of the way. Like I'd be just like trying to ask people like, what do you think of this idea? What do you think of that idea? Or, you know, okay, we finally have like our prototype, like does anybody have a friend who likes these kinds of things that doesn't know me and will maybe say something mean to me about it? Because I need that right now. Um, I would build in public as much as possible because I think the thing that's made me the most sad as a scout, I get really attached to teams that pitch. And it can be really sad when it's like, yeah, we've been pitching for a while and we're running out of money. We've been pitching for like 6 months or like a year, and like we don't know what's going on. And like we're not sure what's next for us. Like that's a huge bummer. And I think the only way I would know to avoid that is to try to get as much feedback as possible every step of the way. And people could be wrong. Like people might not, a publisher can give you feedback and be wrong. A person can give you feedback and be wrong. But like, at least if you're getting the information, you can decide if you want to listen to it or not. And maybe you reject 90% of what people tell you, but there's like that 10% where you're like, okay, I think that makes sense. I'm going to listen to that one bit and ignore the rest.
Sorry, I was just unmuting. I think that makes a ton of sense. And I like what you called out earlier about how difficult it is and the sacrifice as well. And I just wanted to call out for anyone still watching, if you might be a studio founder or part of a founding team, like the amount of sacrifice, of courage and bravery and like putting yourself out there and figuring out how it's going to work financially is astronomical. And I freelance full time. So like I work for myself and I see it to a smaller
Yeah,
degree, but like starting and founding a studio,
it's no
I have
joke.
so much respect. Like if you're watching this, I have so much respect. I hope you keep going. I hope you keep making art. I hope you keep making awesome fucking games um and stories that you want to tell ultimately. But Rachel, thank you so much for coming on. This is again just gold mine of wisdom.
Thank you.
Again, I appreciate it so much. I'm sure everyone watching does as well. We're going to open it up for Q&A in a second, but before we do, we'll just say bye to the VOD. So for everyone who's watching the recording, thank you for being here. Our socials will be in the description if you'd like to follow us on social media, and if you have any feedback or topics you want to see covered in the future, let us know. Thank you again, Rachel. Let's open it up for Q&A. Thanks to everyone watching the recording.